Crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with a party ensemble for Neat and Tangled. Neat and Tangled is having a contest or like kind of a challenge. They're asking you to create a party ensemble with 3 or more pieces featuring Neat and Tangled. Unfortunately, I am coming right in at the deadline, so otherwise I'd say go over and participate in the challenge, but yeah, it's going to be closed by the time you see this pretty much. I'll be just a few hours shy of the deadline. Anyway, I decided to use the Neat and Tangled Wild Ones stamp set as my sort of main piece, my main inspiration, but I'm going to pull in a few other things from Neat and Tangled as well. And to get started, I decided to color in some of the critters from the stamp set. I'm going to use the giraffe, the monkey, and the little bird. I'm going to use YR 23, 15, and 35 for the giraffe and the bird, although I took all the time to show you how to color this giraffe with these colors, which I like quite a bit, and then I accidentally used the other giraffe that I'd had previously colored, and so my colors might look a little bit different, but I do really like the way that this bright giraffe turned out, and I used this, like I said, the same colors on the bird, so hopefully it gives you an idea for a good giraffe combination. And to create some simple shadows for the giraffe, I am going to just add a little bit of shading to one side of the neck as if the sun is shining directly towards his front and it's leaving a shadow on his back. But I don't 100% follow through with that. I'm not one of those people who creates really detailed scenes, and he's not going to really be in a full-on scene with a light source, so it's not as important. But there's just little things you can do to add dimension, which you've heard me talk about a few times if you've watched my channel, where I am going to add like a little bit of shading on the top of his back and on his belly, and that will just give his body a little bit of a rounded effect. I also know that there's going to be more shadows on his legs that are behind, so his back legs, I guess you might call them, but the 2 legs that are behind the legs in front. I'm sorry, you probably understand what I'm trying to say. I used YR 35 as my lightest color, 15 as my medium, and 23 as my darkest color. They're all quite different in terms of numbers, but I like to use the Sandy Allnock hex chart to give me an idea of which ones go together regardless of the number system so that I can utilize what I have. I also, to color the brown spots, I'm going to use E35, 33, and 31. As you're going to see, not the whole thing is going to be colored during the video, but just because there's a lot to show, a lot of different pieces coming together. And I'm going to use those same combinations of browns to color the monkey. I'm just going to pull in a slightly darker color, the E37, and then for the sort of like blue-green elements that I'm going to use later, I will be pulling in G 000, 00, and 02. And then for the pinks that you will see throughout, I'm going to be using R 81, 83, and 85. I'll try to make sure all of that is linked in the video description, although of course feel free to remind me to add that if I forget. Next up, I wanted to kind of focus on the card for this tutorial just because that's what I traditionally do on my channel, although I'll show you some of the little things I did to complete the other elements as I think they could be useful. But I wanted to show how you could create custom colors. I wanted everything to match pretty well because I'm creating an ensemble. And so I want to make sure that I'm using the same pinks throughout, and you can use your Copic markers to color elements, but I wanted to show you ways you could do it that felt a little bit less wasteful. So I don't have to color the entire piece of paper and then die cut. Instead, I die cut my Big Hugs sentiment, which is also a Neat and Tangled die, and then I used a little bit of the Frog Delicate Painter's Tape to hold it in place. There's a couple other things you can do. I think press and seal might work well on the back to kind of hold the die down. Any sort of lightly tacky adhesive, I would recommend. I just use that painter's tape because it's something I have on hand. It almost never rips my paper, so I find it to be a good resource. And I'm going to try to do a little bit of blending just because this is a really big element on the card, so I can add a little bit of an ombre effect. And I'm using those same R colors I mentioned, 85, 83, and 81. Even though they are R's or reds, they are of course very pink. Next up, I wanted to coordinate with the green. I don't really want to call it green because it has such a blue tone to it too, but I guess it's a green. It's basically cracked pistachio. The Copic colors that I used to match, as mentioned before, G000, G00, G02. They have a very similar look to cracked pistachio. So I'm using cracked pistachio as a coordinating set. I like to come up with Copic combinations that match my most used inks. Here I am using Distress Oxide ink, but I think you could do it with regular Distress ink. I know you can. There's no real difference in the technique. I'm not taking advantage of its oxide properties. I'm really just adding a bit of color down. And like I was saying, I think it's good to realize what colors of Copics might match your inks. And that can take a little bit of trial and error, but once you have it, writing it down somewhere can be a helpful resource. As I've used this, knowing that cracked pistachio matches them, I've used that knowledge before to help me out. The stencil that I'm using, also from Neat and Tangled, it is the Balloon Duo. I'm just using one of the stencils and I'm moving it throughout the paper. I want to create the effect of balloons sort of just floating up into the sky. And once I had done this, I really liked the way the background looked, but I kind of thought it looked a little bit funny with the giraffe because it almost makes like the giraffe floating. Like, why are the balloons below the giraffe? So if I were doing this again, I might not put the balloons all the way to the bottom of the card. I might have it look like they were just kind of floating right from the bottom of where he is standing, so that he doesn't appear to be floating in space. Although, again, this is not a genuine scene, so it's not too big of a deal. Once I have that background made, and I didn't show you inking every little balloon, but I just, wanted to give you an idea of what I was doing, and the finger dauber really helped. It's easier for those small spaces than the large tool. I wanted my matte to match exactly with my pinks, so I just took my R85 chisel tip and I ran it along the very edges, and it looks like I have this whole big piece of pink paper behind that perfectly coordinates, but really it was just a very little tiny bit of my marker. I would never want to color in a full sheet. Copic ink is a little bit on the pricier side. I don't mind using my Copic ink, but I do definitely try to be conscious of it. And so even just running that chisel tip along the edge can create that perfectly coordinated matte. I'm going to pop up my giraffe on foam tape, but then later on I'm going to add a present. And I don't think that quite got on film, but that present is going to just be laid flat so that it looks like it's a little bit behind the giraffe and adds a bit more dimension to the scene, since there are some like the layers of the balloons behind and then the present and then the giraffe. And then I wanted to add a birthday sentiment because this is a birthday card. It's a whole little birthday ensemble. So it says basically big birthday hugs, and I pulled in this birthday sentiment from Big Top Birthday. It actually says happy birthday, but I'd already previously cut it in half. I cut the sentiment in half so that I could just stamp birthday, or I could stack the happy and birthday, and I just sort of positioned it with a little tiny banner there in the corner to modify my sentiment and make that big hugs into a birthday sentiment. Next up, I cut a scalloped circle, and I'm going to do this same idea where I just add a little bit of the pink to create a background that's perfectly coordinated. I already have the green in the balloon from the little monkey there that I'm going to add, and so if I have a little bit of the blue, or green, my head just can't get around whether it's blue or green. The green, and so I might as well pull in some of the pink so that all of my pieces sort of coordinate. But then there's also this yellow color that's kind of going on, and so I'm going to incorporate that later too. I think it's a bit of an unconventional combination. I don't usually think of all three of those colors together, but I am pretty happy with the way that it turned out. And I want to add this party animal sentiment, which is from the Wild Ones stamp set that I got all the images from. I just think it would be fun. I'm kind of trying to create like a kids sort of theme birthday party, and that's why I'm going with the pink. I guess is pretty feminine, but the other color is a little bit more neutral, and so I kind of liked that balance of not going too much one way or the other. I stamped the party animal, and I did cut it in half so that I could stack it on top of each other. Next up, I wanted to create another party piece. There were supposed to be at least 3 pieces, and I create 4, but I only show 3 on camera just because the last one with the little treat bag where it's just the bird on a yellow circle, it was just so easy to do and pretty self-explanatory. Last up, I wanted just to create a name tag, and so I took a piece of thick cardstock and I cut it down to a rectangle that would be big enough for my Neat and Tangled alphabet there, since I knew I could spell the name of all the party guests with that alphabet. And I'm just going to cut a bunch of the letters. I kind of kept them all together just because I do like the way that that looks as almost like sort of a background die. So I'll just cut a bunch of them out of white cardstock, and then I can continue to use the same strategy I've been using this whole time and customize things with my Copic markers. To create the ground, I just took a piece of Post-it note tape and I masked off the top of my folded over little table tent name card thing, and then I used the same Distress Oxide cracked pistachio ink to create the grass of sorts. And this is why ultimately I kind of call it more of a green color, because I'm using it as a green. And most people are probably like, you're crazy, Jess, it's just a green. Anyway, sorry. I'm just going to take my chisel tip because it colors a little bit faster, and I actually find like that it's easier on these little tiny finicky pieces. I'm going to use the R85. I'm going to color in my name here, and I'm just going to spell my sister's name as an example. I've talked about her a few times. She's also a crafter. And I will add the little monkey. I want to be careful that I don't let him hang off the bottom, because then the table tent or the little name tag won't stand up. And I also only want to add adhesive to the parts that are actually going to stick to the name tag, because I don't want it to be sticky behind his balloon, which won't be attached to anything when it's standing up. At first I thought I would just put the name, but because the name was so short, I thought it'd be funny to like add the party animal thing, like your attendees are party animals, because, you know, I don't know, I hope that makes sense. So it's party animal Jen, party animal whoever else is coming to your party. I guess it wouldn't work with longer names, except for that you could make longer table tents. Anyway, that's it for my little party ensemble here. As mentioned, this is for a Neat and Tangled challenge, so I will leave you a link to their blog, because they do have more challenges in the future, and so hopefully you can participate in those, since I didn't remind you early enough of this one. And I will leave you links to the products that I used in the video description below. Thank you so much for watching my channel. I appreciate the time you take to watch my videos and to leave comments, and I really appreciate them. Have an awesome day. Bye.